Okay, greetings. Hello. Today our group will present about our research proposal topic, which is an update to fraud prevention measure in Malaysia SMEs. Here's my group name list, and my name is Muhammad Asriq bin Raduan. Okay, let me brief you about the background of our research proposal. SMEs playing big role in growth of GDP for a country. In every developed nation, SMEs alone contribute 40% to their national income, while in Indonesia they contribute 36%. In addition to that, they provide 50% of employment worldwide according to World Bank research. As we can see from the pie chart there, the total of SMEs registered in Malaysia is 98%, which comprises of micro, small, and medium. Also, in the table show that the breakdown of what industry in SME into mostly in Malaysia. Next, fraud. Fraud is our main issue of our research proposal. In US, $42 billion has recorded for fraud in SME, while in Malaysia, 2 million loss has recorded and 80% of the survey tell Barbie is the main factor. A study from PwC in 2008 for fraud survey has revealed that 41% Malaysia company experienced economic crime and its 28 increase from 2016. The word increase there has been the main things that we should be worried, and it is the motivation for us to choose the area of research. In a study for the PwC also, they conclude that Malaysia company rely more on compliance than control, and the business leader unaware to the potential fraud. Why we conduct the research? The continuous research for the topic were being conducted as to always monitoring the progressive of measure undertaken by SMEs react to the current situation according to Jaya Hassan Elwani. Moreover, even though so much research about economic crime being conducted, but there's only a few research specifically talk about SMEs environment in Malaysia. To identify the current the objective is first to identify the current awareness of fraud in the SMEs. For this objective, initially the process starts by identifying the human and organization behavior pertaining fraud matters to identify the current progress of awareness among them. Second objective is to identify the level of fraud or measure information in the SME. For this part, we collect the information about how currently the organization react to the fraud and what measure that have the implement in the SME to us get a full sight of level fraud measure that being taken as a whole. Third is to identify the type of fraud happen or likely to happen in the SME. We comparing the current type of fraud that recorded and happened with previous research to identify new trend of fraud and what type of fraud that has been decreased due to prevention measure taken currently. To give recommendation pertaining the methods of fraud measure among SMEs. After finish collecting data, we formulate idea to give recommendation in to overcome the current problem from the research that made. We identify a few limitations for the study. One of it is SME is not bound to disclose detailed information of internal control activities for the external audit. Since our source of data are come from external auditors, then it would be less detailed data from expected.
As for my part, I will present our research literature review. Literature review means published or unpublished research articles that others have conducted in the areas that are relevant to the study. In our research, we have prepared for theoretical review that illustrate the measurement of research. As you can see, fraud prevention is consisted of three elements, that is, control environment, risk assessment, and control activities. This research is able to improve the understanding of the public at large and more specifically the owners of SME towards fraudulent activities. Besides that, gathering literature on fraud prevention measures in Malaysia SME. Next, SME as research context. SME has been the main catalyst for the economic growth of the country, particularly in developing countries. It has defined by Abel and Quek in 2015 that SME are the companies that consisted of not more than 20 employees and mainly privately owned. In Malaysia, the National SME Development Council has described Malaysian SME in terms of scale, number of full-time employees, and annual sales turnover, as well as the activities run by the enterprise. As you can see in this table, there are two categories, which is manufacturing and services and other sectors. For small enterprise, the sales turnover has to be 300,000 ringgit to less than 15 million ringgit. For services and other sectors, it has to be 300,000 ringgit to less than 3 million ringgit. For the number of employees, it has to be 5 to less than 75 employees, while services in other sectors, it has to be 5 to less than 30 employees. For medium enterprise, the sales turnover has to be 15 million ringgit to not exceed 50 million ringgit. For services in other sectors, it has to be 3 million ringgit to not exceeding 20 million ringgit. For the number of employees, it has to be 5 to less than 30 employees, and services in other sectors, it has to be 30 to not exceeding 75 employees. There are three categories of SME, namely micro-enterprise, small enterprise, and medium enterprise. More than 900,000 active establishments in various sectors in Malaysia since 2016 up to current. The table shows the distribution of SME data in Malaysia. Micro-enterprise has the highest number of establishments as compared to others. Aladjb in Oladimeji in 2019 has described, fraud is assumed to be more vulnerable on small companies rather than larger organizations. For example, the owners might engage in complex transactions that are designed to misrepresent the financial performance of the enterprise. This is likely show that the owner is overriding on their position and power, as well as due to lack of managerial skills. Effects of fraudulent activities on SME may be devastating, which led to bankruptcy. Emphasizing in fraud prevention through good control over the activities environment, as well as risk assessment is required. The internal control concepts. Internal control acted as the important indicator in measuring the efficiency of the business operations. Most frequently, internal control being exercised by the management to ensure the smoothness of day-to-day operations that leads to the long-term success of a company. According to Committee of Sponsoring Organizations Framework, COSO, the internal control comprised of 5 subpoints, namely control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, control activities, and monitoring, respectively. All of the components are designed to ensure day-to-day operations are well managed that make it possible for the management act reasonably and making wise decisions to achieve its goal and objective. Prior research indicated that the efficiency of internal control in SME have resulted positively in the business, and it is a significant method in fraud prevention. According to Guardia 2009, regardless of small or large enterprise, the internal control system should not be ignored. To conclude, a strong emphasis on fraudulent-related activities mitigation is crucial as it decreases the potential fraud to exist in a business.
Hello everyone, my name is Ranti Bayang and this is the fraud literature review. Okay, the definition of fraud encompasses several activities in which financial institution participant makes misleading claims about the fair existence of financial state of health investment source. Fraud in financial statement was also distinguished from deceptive redundant practices in that it spreads outright lies and bogus information as opposed to simply producing deceiving recognition. By combining the deception of disclosure with inaccurate information, financial statement fraud grows the asymmetry of this information while minimizing it. Okay, Mokuro in 2011 note that misrepresentation is an ability and tendency to do what's going on while monitoring the harm. Okay, this is the fraud triangle theory. This is used to identify what are the reasons of offenders to commit a fraud. Okay, there are three: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. Okay, pressure is that when explaining the pressure of opportunity to commit fraud, it is important to use word perceive. This is because pressure of opportunity to commit fraud might not be true, so it depends only on the expectation of the individual. Okay, Vona in 2008 explores certain individual and corporate pressure as the reason for fraud committing of the important motivation. Example of pressure include greed, living beyond one means, overspend, or personal debt. Family financial problems and drug addiction are also the examples included. Okay, opportunity are the weakness in the system where the employee can exploit and possibly commit fraud, power, and capacity. The weaker the corporate structure of internal control, the more likely opportunity to hide fraud. Organizational mediocre auditing system, internal control weakness, availability of accounting records, and poor separation of duties have a significant impact on the individual ability to act to commit fraud. Wills and Zimmerman in 2004 argues that the related party transaction can also be considered among the various elements suggesting the possibility of committing a fraud. Okay, the last one is rationalization. This definition suggests that fraudster will express various types of moral appropriate action while committing fraud that will be used to rationalize the idea before violating the trust. Okay. Rationalization refers to the perpetrator's belief that the unethical and dishonest behavior committing is not a criminal activity but something else. Rationalization also is fairly hard to observe. It is difficult to read a perpetrator's mind based on Tracy in 1953. Okay. The element of incentive or pressure, opportunities, rationalization, and capability are all interrelated between the elements, and they have a major effect on each other to the degree that fraud cannot occur when all of them are present. Okay. The theory can establish a collection of delinquency conditions, but not every element is a necessary precondition for white-collar crime. Even though incentives are important but not that sufficient condition for fraud, studies also shows that perceived pressure is irrelevant to those offenses of those who commits the act of fraudulent. Implementing techniques to reinforce the organization ethics and effectively promote legal behavior combined with a tailor-made internal control structure are necessary to commit future frauds. Okay, these are the steps to commit dishonest acts. They are divided into two. As you can see, non-financial and financial. Okay, we go through the non-financial first. Okay, this lack of pressure, that is because lack of promotion, lack of pension, pressure to achieve certain tasks, etc. Okay, it will lead to opportunity, absence of opportunity. For example, effective internal control and audit, efficient corporate governance, and regular job rotation. And this will lead to person to quit. Okay. For financial category, there is pressure because of the greed, financial problem, as mentioned earlier, drug addiction, and spending beyond earning, etc. And it will lead to the opportunity of when there is poor internal control and audit, poor corporate governance, and lack of rotation, job rotation. And the presence of opportunity will lead to rationalization, and finally, fraud occurrence. Okay, that is all from me, and thank you for listening.
Hi, I'll talk about the fraud prevention measures. Now, what is fraud prevention? The fraud prevention is the proactive measure initiated by an organization to prevent and stop the existence of frauds. There are many companies that not emphasize the fraud prevention measures. Now, what are the causes of fraud prevention is not taken? This is because the company will remain flexible and lenient practice toward the occurrence of fraud rather than immediate response to the related authorities. However, for SME, they actually face challenge in fraud prevention measures. The first challenge is the cost-related or insufficient funding in SME. Normally, the fraud prevention measure is cost-related and they need a certain funding to sustain the fraud prevention measure. The second, the owner bear the obligations of frauds. This is because when the fraud risk happens, only the owner will bear the liabilities, the obligations, and the fraud risk. The third challenge is the small corporate structures and lack of corporate governance in SME. Normally, the SME will have small corporate structures and can easily control by one person. This means the corporate and the company will not have segregation of duty, they will have redundant of responsibilities, and they will have conflict of interest. Now, there are 3 points if the fraud prevention measure is implemented. The first point is the company will be able to maintain the current financial status. The second is you can attract more investor and the investor will confidence on your financial report. The third is the benefit of stakeholders is protected because the company who implement the fraud prevention measure will have less conflict of interest. Move to the next. There are 3 key objectives of effective and efficient fraud prevention, including preventions, detections, and response. Prevention means the company identify the control to stop or to cease the fraud risk. For detections, the company determine the uncover frauds when the fraud is happens. For response, the company establish the corrective actions or consolidate the policy making when the fraud risk is happens. There are 3 steps to implement the fraud prevention measures. For prevention perspective, we can consolidate the values, ethics, and corporate governance, such as the monitor the compliance of anti-bribery or corruption procedures or money laundering. For detections, the company can adhere the code of conduct and other law, such as Anti-Money Laundering Act, Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act, Whistleblowers Protection Act, Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, and so on. For response, the company need to set a common guidance on ethical problems and how to handling the fraud, such as provide the example of misconduct and ethical and unethical behaviors. The unethical behavior can be conflict of self-interest or divert the company's sales. So, in a nutshell, fraud prevention measures need continued assessment and refinements on the existing program. This is because the crime fraud constantly transforms and the fraudster attempt to breach the systems. However, fraud prevention measures is cost related, and the cost of prevention fraud is actually less than the cost incurred after the fraud is committed. There is a word, prevention is better than cure.
Hi everyone, I'm Diandra and I will present about the data and methodology they plan to carry out the research. As explained earlier in the introduction, there are few limitations in the same area of data research, which includes the non-disclosure of internal control, the time constraint, and lack of feedback received. Therefore, our proposed data research would only aim for small respondents in Kuching, Malaysia, in which we suggest to select samples from external auditors based in Kuching that is directly engaged towards the audit engagement process on the SMEs organization. The proposed framework for data and methodology step-up process, as you can see on the screen. First, research design using the quantitative approach, the data collection process using questionnaires, data analyzing using the statistical package for social sciences, SPSS software and Microsoft, and the graph and simulation, while formulating the result using background reading, risk assessment, and system analysis. The research design using the quantitative approach which can be described as investigation performed systematically, statistically, mathematically, and the make use of computational technique towards quantifiable data collection. The method of primary data collection, according to the quantitative approach, would be through questionnaire survey distribution. Google form is used for easy tracing and distribution. The selected respondents among auditors in Kuching, Malaysia would be random from audit firm that can be found through internet. We provide assurance that the information provided will be confidential and only for the use of the study. The data descriptions. As you can see here, the questionnaires overview, in which the questionnaires will consist of open-ended and closed-ended questions, 4 sections and 20 questions overall. The first part is the demography. The second part is the existence of fraud prevention or internal control measure using the yes or no type of question, question 8 until 10. The third part is the regarding fraud. Question 11, asking for encounter experience. Question 12 is the likely happen organization. Currently, fraud happen. And under part 3 also, regarding fraud, using the 5-point Likert scale, is the likelihood to happen in future. The last part is the open-ended questions regarding the auditor's opinion towards the fraud measure and the fraud awareness in an organization, the SMEs. We will not further collect the actual figures of any losses incurred by the SMEs, and the limit to the auditor's concern about the type of fraud and the fraud prevention measures, example through observation and only auditor's opinion. The SMEs that is classified into micro, small, and medium are to be gathered as one, and we propose to use the random sampling method to select the type of SMEs. The data description. Subsequent to the data collection, we suggest that using the statistical package for social sciences, SPSF, software, and Microsoft, it is believed that this SPSS is used for the ad hoc analysis, for testing of hypotheses, predictive analytic, analyze trends, forecasts, and plan to validate assumptions, accurate conclusions. Due to the large amount of data, we suggest that this data is to be used hypothesis. The presentation of data in terms of graph and table, and we are aware that the valuable information have the characteristics of relevance, quality, timeliness, and the information completeness. The plan to carry out this research using the deduction testing theory or top-down approach, thus beginning with the general formal statement known as hypothesis to a more confirmation result. The use of the theory of scientific research to further analyze the relationship between the awareness of fraud, awareness among employees, level of fraud measure, and type of fraud that most likely to happen. Therefore, assuming the possible hypotheses to be used to start the research there are 2 hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, the different level of fraud measure implementation influences the awareness of fraud among employees. And the second hypothesis is different type of fraud incurred affected by the level effectiveness of fraud measure. The next is the data collection process. The data collection process meant to describe the flow of obtaining the data from the respondents, beginning with sending the application request form until obtaining the survey data. So we assume the data collection process to be in such step as you can see here on the screen. First, email the official letters to the selected audit firms to inform them that they are to be selected to become the respondents of the study research and request for permission Then, reach and contact the targeted audit firms through phones, making appointment for visitation and visit to explain the purpose of study to convince them. The third step is distribution of survey questionnaires through email and expect to receive the responses within a 1-week period. In formulating the result, there are 3 elements. First is the background reading to gain a picture of update situation of main focus, identify the company internal control practices, the real case of fraud and what cause of the event, the risk assessment, the process of identifying the existence of risk include aspect of company current practices and to test existence of fraud measure. And the last element is the system analysis, the fraud measure to be used, collecting any measure taken currently being implemented and speculate the trigger of the occurred event. So in conclusion, this whole research paper is significant for SMEs to be aware of fraudulent activities among employees and owner as these SMEs is crucial for the development of our country nowadays. The theoretical framework, overall control environment, risk assessment and activities. The effective internal control and management can reduce the fraud, as you can see on the literature review. The fraud triangle and fraud diamond theory have 3 main elements, the pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. The fraud prevention measure can avoid any conflict of interest, theft, or misuse of power, or in general, the fraud prevention measure is very important to reduce the likelihood of the fraud happening in the SMEs. Therefore, the proposed to plan the future research, we propose that this is to be done in quantitative approach using hypotheses, data collection, survey questionnaires to external auditors in Malaysia, specifically in Kuching, gathering data and analysis. So last but not least, we hope that to provide the idea, we hope that this paper have provide idea to any researchers that would further carry out the study of fraud in Malaysia's SMEs. Thank you for our group.